Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position along with your favorite beverage to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience of SmithWeekly, including Jeff S., Cindy W., Dave V., and Gordon S. We've got a new guest joining us on the program today. Mr. Peter Akerley is on the podcast with us. Peter is the president and CEO of Erdene Resource Development, Mongolia's newest gold producer that just commissioned the Bayan Khundii conventional open pit gold mine in southwestern Mongolia. The company holds district-scale exploration grounds surrounding the mine with existing deposits and further development opportunities. Erdene Resource Development is listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange under the symbol ERD and on the US OTC markets under the symbol ERDCD. Mr. Akerley, welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions.
It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to our discussion.
Yeah, Peter, it's good to have you on the program. And Erdene has been a company that's definitely come across our desk many times over the years, and you guys are at a very key milestone achievement here just recently. And I want to get to that in just a moment. But given this is your first time on the podcast, why don't you give us your background and experience in the junior natural resource sector?
Sure. I'm a geologist that has spent better part of 38 years now scouring the globe looking for opportunities. I just cut my teeth early on in international exploration opportunities. I was in British Guyana in the early 90s. I then moved on to the Philippines and worked on some of the porphyry copper targets there. Found myself in the mid 1990s with an opportunity to be one of the first explorers to come into Mongolia as it opened up from a socialist period into a market economy, and ended up there for about 3 years in the mid to late 90s. And it was a real eye opener for me from a geologic perspective to see this great belt of rocks, the Central Asian orogenic belt that passes through the southern part of the country, sitting there largely unexplored in a country that was begging for foreign investors to come in and spend money on exploration. And at that time, I was working for a group out of Toronto called International Pursuit. We had actually formed a joint venture with Barrick Gold and ran what was perhaps the largest ever foreign invested regional exploration program in Mongolia. And provided me with this, probably the best country 101 course I could have had. All of that combined put me in a position where I said, you know what, this is an opportunity that I can't pass up. We should go ahead as a team and start our own company focused on Mongolian exploration. And that came about in 2002 when we put together some private investors to back us with Erdene, and launched publicly in 2004. So the better part of sort of 2/3 of that career experience has now been spent in Mongolia, almost 28 years.
Very good information there. And man, what a process, and the jurisdiction, how this has evolved as well as a mining destination. It's a very interesting place, and definitely lots of history here as far as different projects, development projects, some of the challenges and troubles, and then some of the successes here. Before we get into the company, I want to ask you, because I think this is important here as we look at these market conditions out there, but how do you look at the gold market today, and what are your expectations going forward for gold?
I don't think we've ever seen the fundamentals as strong as they are today for gold. When you look at the situation in regards to central bank buying, the sort of concern, I guess, expressed by largely the BRIC countries, but countries all around the world who are concerned about the US dollar direction and security of their foreign reserves, which are held in US instruments. You've seen a shift now into gold as a result of that. So I think when you look at the combination of those things, the gold price looks very strong moving forward. Here we are at 3650, but I wouldn't be surprised to see us end the year in that 4,000 plus range, given the situation geopolitically and from a debt perspective, as I said.
Very interesting times, unprecedented, really. finally, I would say after all these years of in the sector, we finally have this strong move under conditions of which aren't that good of conditions when we look at the geopolitics out there, Peter, as you mentioned there. But definitely there's a lot of reason to see this sustain, if not go higher, here in the years to come, based on all the things that are happening out there, coming together pretty much all at the same time as well. So very interesting. Well, why don't we get into Erdene here? The company just announced first gold as part of commissioning and ramp up at the Bayan Khundii gold mine. Talk about this milestone and give us a brief overview of the key events really over the last 10 years, Peter, to bring this project from exploration into production.
Yeah, it's a tremendously exciting time, and I'd like to say we planned the timing to line up with this 36.50 gold price, but can't take credit for all of that. We in 2018, 2019 had established a very high grade open pit resource at the Bayan Khundii deposit. We had, like most people in our sector, had scratched and clawed our way to raise enough money to just do that work to establish the resource. But we recognized that this district had tremendous potential. We were in a brand new area in terms of exploration in southwestern Mongolia. Had at that time made our second near surface high grade discovery, and it was still very challenging to raise money without massive dilution. And we made a decision at our board level that with this opportunity, we would move forward to a development phase. It's unusual to have 4 gram head grade, great metallurgy at surface, open pitable in an area that was seeing infrastructure growth. So we felt that maybe this didn't quite hit the scale, the size that a lot of our investors and or the industry typically look for at 500,000 ounces. But with all those other attributes and what we saw as a rising gold price environment, we made a decision to move forward. That decision moved us into pre-feas and feasibility. However, that was interrupted by the COVID pandemic that sort of took 2 years out of the wind at our sails. But nonetheless, we fought through that. We began to identify potential partners. We realized that our strength was exploration and corporate development, that we would need to bring in a partner to move that project forward. And we had on site 5 of the top 10 international gold miners. We had a couple of those visit Bayan Khundii repeatedly. However, we began discussions with a group called Mongolian Mining Corporation, run by individuals I'd known for quite some time, over a decade in Mongolia, people that I respected, that have sort of international as well as domestic credibility and relationships. And because of the latter part of that, the relationships they brought, we selected them as the partner to help us move this forward. So in 2022, moving into 2023, we formed a strategic alliance with MMC, which is a Hong Kong listed company, I believe, with about a $2 billion market cap today, who brought the operational and construction strengths directly and with their sister companies to allow us to move into the construction phase for Bayan Khundii. We, by late 23, had started early works, declared formal construction in early 24. And here we are today, just 22 months later, with first gold having just been produced and really a world of opportunities in front of us for growth. We took that position back in 2019 to say, okay, we're going to go heads down, we're going to build this. And exploration, although it continued, not in a very aggressive form. So today, with that cash flow about to start coming in a big way, we can really become aggressive on what is still a brand new district open wide for exploration.
This is quite a good setup here. I was looking over some of the additional deposits you guys have here, Peter, and then of course the current production profile and how that can be expanded, which we'll get into here in a moment and talk a little bit more. Before we do that, congratulations, Peter, on this achievement. This is a fantastic achievement in Mongolia, and hopefully more of this to come in the years as Mongolia continues to heat up as a mining jurisdiction. Before we get into more of the ongoing work at the company, talk about Mongolia as a mining destination in general. It's been mixed over the decades, if you will. What are your thoughts and views on the country in terms of the benefits and the challenges based on your experience? Now you have firsthand experience of this, as well as how you see it behaving going forward as a mining friendly jurisdiction.
Well, the benefits are obvious in terms of the geologic fertility, prospectivity, and the lack of exploration. I've worked around the world. I don't think there's many places on the planet that have the combination of, a high likelihood of producing more very unique high grade and or very large copper gold epithermal porphyry deposits, uh, and not having seen exploration. So that's not going to change until we get out there and put more drill holes into this very large area in southern Mongolia. From an exploration sort of regulatory perspective, we have explored over 100 exploration licenses. We've gone through the process of converting those into mining deposits and licenses, regulated or sort of registered that with the government. And it's been very prescribed. It can be fairly heavy in the bureaucracy to go through those processes, but we have not faced any issues in terms of Title II, those licenses, or the conversion to go from an exploration license, which is a 12-year term, into a mining license that can provide you up to 70 years of tenure. As I say, is a fairly well prescribed process. You go through the filing of a resource registration and then a detailed environmental impact assessment, public meetings. And yeah, so we've been through that a number of times now and faced no real issues with that. I think when you look at that history of Mongolia, and sometimes considered to have been a negative experience by many, it's largely tied to the Oyu Tolgoi negotiations that dragged on for many years. And you can kind of pick either side of that debate, I guess, in terms of how the government handled it or how Rio handled it. And it did drag on for a number of years. But today, you have what it is about to be the fourth largest copper gold mine on the planet, producing with 10,000 people employed in the South Gobi and $15 billion invested by Rio Tinto. So they've weathered that storm and come out of that with a premier copper gold deposit in production. And I guess if you compare that with the other mega copper gold projects around the world that have attempted to come on stream during that same period, most have failed for various reasons. So I think Mongolia actually has proven that it can get through the development and permitting process to get these things to production. I'd also flag that over the last couple of years, you've seen the French government, through their uranium company Orano, announce that they are going to be building the sixth largest uranium project in the world in Mongolia. So that process is starting up as well. You had Zijin make their first sort of formal foray into Mongolia through their investment in Xanadu's Harmagtai project, and a number of other companies that have come in and started to evaluate opportunities. So I feel like you've seen a turning of the tide in terms of the very large scale companies internationally coming in and making those investments. One of the hindrances to Mongolia's mining industry really picking up and more companies like those I just mentioned coming in is the lack of availability of product. The Mongolian government used to have an open staking system that was converted to a tender process a number of years ago, and they're just not fast enough in terms of getting those tenders into the market, and perhaps not sophisticated enough in how they present those opportunities. So a tender might come out, tomorrow, and a number of domestic companies apply for it, but the knowledge is not widespread for the international players to come in and have time to assess and acquire. And also, what they're doing with this tender process is just throwing back into the mix the same scale properties that might have been turned in by other companies. So if you think about a major coming into Mongolia, they really need that large opportunity, large scale property to invest and do proper exploration. And so there is some blockages there, and something that we work closely with the mining ministry and the MRPAM, which is the registration group in Mongolia. And they are cognizant of this and they are working towards some changes. So that's one, just the inability of land. The other is, although they have quite a competitive royalty on gold, which sits at 5%, they have a graduated royalty on copper that at these copper prices gets you up north of 10% on the NSR. So that's been a bit of a blockage as well. And the government has announced recently they plan to put to Parliament an adjustment downwards on the copper royalty. So there's a couple of things that have restricted the amount of foreign investment coming in, but those that have been able to get their teeth into high quality projects like Rio, like Orano, Zijin, and ourselves, there hasn't been a sort of limitation on expenditures or moving things forward. And back to our experience, and somewhat reflected on Rio too, we moved this from feasibility to production in a little less than 2 years. And that's almost unheard of in terms of permitting around the globe today. I think I forget who came out with the study, but one of the Fraser Institutes or others came out with a statistic that suggested on average it takes 17 years now to go from feasibility to production. So Mongolia has demonstrated that they can move things along pretty quickly. And when I say reflected with Rio, if you take out the negotiation period for Rio, it was only about 3 years for them to go from feasibility to production, which again, for a project of that scale is hard to find a comparison globally. So yeah, it's a bit of a snapshot of the Mongolian situation today.
Peter, thank you for that. Lots of good information there. And you guys have been able to go through this process, and government relations in the country are super important. That's just a quite a process in itself. And, like you said, to be able to bring on projects like this one and some of the much larger projects over there as well within the timeframes that were able to be done here, I think that speaks to possibly the attractiveness of the jurisdiction compared to other jurisdictions which have a huge bureaucratic process that need significant overhaul. So I think that's interesting. And then also, you've got regional areas. Kazakhstan, of course, is heating up, and you see some work going on there. And it looks like there is an effort by the Mongolian government to continue to increase that competitiveness as a jurisdiction. The resource endowment's impressive. So very good information on that front, and looking forward to seeing how this progresses in the future. Talk a little bit more about some of the ongoing support you're getting from your partner, MMC, Mongolian Mining Corporation. Talk a little bit about them, and then also how you see the support and interest in the project going forward as you guys look towards expansion in the years ahead.
So Mongolian Mining Corporation is listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, as I mentioned, about a $2 billion market cap, the largest private producer of steelmaking coal in the country. I think they had an EBITDA last year of over $500 million. They made a decision back in 2002, 2001 that they were looking to diversify into copper and gold projects. And having known them for a number of years, we began some discussions about a possible investment in Erdene, which was fortuitous because, as I discussed earlier, we were right at that point of looking to seek a partner who could bring construction strengths, operating experience, but their ability to bring in that local national relationships was obviously you couldn't find a comparison to that internationally. So we saw an opportunity to align with what we viewed was the best potential partner, both locally and internationally. And they not only brought the strengths of their mining experience, which includes 2,000 mining personnel in their facilities in Eastern Mongolia, but those local relationships. But in addition to that, they're part of a group of companies that is under the umbrella of a conglomerate called MCS. MCS is perhaps Mongolia's largest business conglomerate, and they brought sister organizations that were completing mine construction for Rio Tinto, for instance. One of their subsidiaries is the largest power transmission new power plant construction company in Mongolia. They bring logistics companies, transportation companies. And when we looked at that and we thought about our strategy, we weren't just looking to build a one-off gold mine. We were looking to build out a district. And they brought all of these strengths that you would need to build out a new mining district in an area that was pretty much empty of infrastructure. It's coming to us, but they brought that opportunity to do much more than any other company could do. And a testament to that, just a bit of a snapshot, is their sister company, MCSI, has now constructed a 240-kilometer power line from the border area to bring in electricity to our site. That's something that we couldn't even begin to think about but they had the relationships with the Inner Mongolia power grid people. They had the ability to build that, and they funded that themselves. We've done a power purchase agreement with that sister company so that we didn't have to put up the upfront capital. So that's just a little snapshot of some of the intangibles, I guess, that they've brought that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to access, but a terrific partner.
Yeah, sounds great. Good to have that in place, and very good setup here with your guys' partner there. And this is going to be a key asset as you guys move forward into looking towards other opportunities within the district that you guys have. I want to shift over to capital structure for a moment, and then we'll get back into some other details. Balance sheet, and then of course the cash on hand, where you guys stand currently, what you can say about that, Peter. And then what would you see here as far as rough expectations on guidance to finish up the year? Maybe
Mhm.
you can also talk about 2026 and maybe that first half. And then with that, shares outstanding, and of course the key shareholders on the roster.
Let me start with the relationship with MMC in terms of how that business structure feeds into the parent company. So we struck a 50-50 joint venture alliance with MMC at the subsidiary level. So our subsidiary, Erdene Mongol, is now 50% Erdene Parent Co. and 50% MMC. What we did in addition to that was we kept outside of that 50-50 alliance a 5% NSR that is to the credit of Erdene parent company that kicks in after the first 400,000 ounces of gold. So we see that sort of coming on stream in year 4 or year 5, where not only do we have the 50% interest in proceeds, we have a 5% kicker. We kept outside of that alliance our Zunma molybdenum copper project that perhaps we can come back to later. The subsidiary is the entity that holds all of the debt that was raised to build this facility, which was 115 million direct capital. Total drawn on debt today is about 118 when you include interest. So that's held at the subsidiary level and will be paid back as we move into cash flow over the next several months. We have undrawn working capital facilities as well, so there's quite a significant buffer there should we need it, but we feel comfortable with the cash flow we have in front of us that there will be no more debt drawn. Stepping back to the parent company, Erdene Toronto listed Co. has approximately $5 million in cash, but effectively unallocated cash. We have a couple of other projects. I mentioned Zunmod and another one we recently secured an option agreement in that we will spend some monies on, but relatively small monies, perhaps in the $500,000 range over the next 6 to 12 months on both of those. Because of where we are price-wise today, we also have significant in-the-money options. I think in total about $8 million that kind of dribbles in as we move forward. So I don't see the $5 million number as depleting. In fact, I see it increasing over the next several months into next year as we see those options get exercised along the way. So very strong position cash-wise. When you look at the cash flow situation for EM, we are projecting hitting nameplate by the end of this year. So we just announced first gold commissioning complete on September 14th. And now we'll go through the ratcheting up of that operation to 7,000 ounces per month by year end. That will generate, in terms of average production, 85,000 ounces over a 12-month period in 26, and generate, if gold prices stay at this level, in excess of $200 million in after-tax cash flow, which, as I mentioned, will go to repaying the debt. At these levels, we'll see that debt repaid in less than 12 months, at which point we will start to look at dividending the proceeds back to the shareholders, which is the 50-50 Erdene and MMC. Before we get to that point, one of the things that we are both in agreement is we want to dedicate significant funding into the exploration that's been somewhat restricted over the last couple of years. So almost immediately here in the next couple of months, we'll begin to deploy increased dollars into the exploration side and spend over the next 12 to 14 months close to $10 million on exploration on various targets around the mine site and to the north at Altan Nar. So pretty exciting, increase in exploration news that you'll see flowing out of the cash flow situation. Coming back to sort of the near term, we'll begin to feed higher grade material into the plant. As I mentioned at the outset, this is a very high grade open pit at 4 gram per ton average grade. So we'll begin to ratchet things up as we fine tune that plant to get to that 4 gram head grade as we move towards the end of this year.
Peter, that's great. Maybe we'll continue here in just a moment. I want to talk about some of the dividend and some of that cash allocation. Lots of optionality here with what you guys are going to do. And then, of course, looking down the road on expansion. We'll talk about that in a moment. Just to finish up on cap structure, shares outstanding, and then also any key shareholders on the roster you wanted to mention.
Yeah, sure. So we just completed the consolidation, consolidated on the basis of 6-1, and today we have 61 million shares outstanding. That gives us a market cap of just under 500 million Canadian. In terms of shareholders, our largest shareholder is Mr. Eric Sprott, who holds 23%. We have the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, who's been a supporter of Erdene for over a decade now, is our probably next largest shareholder. We have a very wide array of institutional shareholders. Perhaps because of my experience and spending a lot of time in Asia, we have institutions in Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Australia, Turkey, Europe, of course, and throughout North America, with an increasing number of, I'd say, generalist institutions based out of Eastern US, largely New York, that have taken on an increasingly large position in our company. I'd also mention that we are Eastern Canadian based. We're actually in Halifax, Dartmouth, and we've had a growing group of investors here in Eastern Canada, high net worth, that control close to 25% of our register amongst a small number of local investors. So very tightly held. The other thing I would like to mention is that Erdene listed on the Mongolian Stock Exchange back in 2017. We are the only dual listed company on the Mongolian Stock Exchange. About 4% of our shareholder base are Mongolian citizens. And we took that approach because we'd heard for many years from Mongolian business people, politicians, that foreign companies come to Mongolia. Perhaps they find success, but in any case, they don't provide an opportunity for their average investor to be part of their natural resource opportunities. And so we took that to heart. We helped the Federal Regulatory Commission and the Mongolian Stock Exchange rewrite their regulations and worked out to get this listing complete. And in the process, did a private placement. We also awarded shares to individuals, families that lived in close proximity to our site. So there was that shared benefit element as well. So today we have 7,000 Mongolian shareholders who hold about 4% of our register.
Excellent. Well, congratulations on that. That's also a very good item, both on community alignment, government alignment work. Good to have them on there. Good to see that you guys actually went through and did the listing there. That's good. Adds more opportunities in the local domestic economy, as well as folks that want to invest there locally. That's fantastic as well. So I appreciate you going through that. Of course, Eric Sprott, definitely a good supporter there. And of course, the development bank, and being able to keep them on board all these years is fantastic, Peter. So thank you for walking through that. I'm going to come back to key people in just a moment here on the dividend, and then how you guys are looking at debt repayment. I'm assuming it's all hands on deck. All cash goes towards that repayment as first priority. Then from there, you guys will start to implement some sort of a base dividend. And then from there, a lot of capital allocation, which makes sense to me, going towards existing deposits and also the exploration opportunities. Is that more or less what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's right. So, if we look at sort of mid next year, ideally the debt's about paid off. We will, prior to the repayment of the debt, as I mentioned, allocate some monies into exploration to pick up the pace there. But at that point, we will have a dividend paid to shareholders from the subsidiary, and a decision to be made by Erdene Parent Co.'s board on whether we utilize that as for dividend and or share buyback, and that decision will get made as we move towards that point next year. In terms of new project development, we have a couple of opportunities to begin to consider a second mine being built, and so we'll assess that as well. we wouldn't expect to deploy the funding to build that second facility completely from cash flow. We will look to tap into the debt markets, who continually offer us preferential rates, I guess, compared to what we would have experienced if you look back a year or so ago.
Good to hear on that front. And I think initially capturing that demographic of investor that's looking for dividend income as well as the growth opportunity, I think that's a good move when you guys start to put that in place as well. So excellent work on that front and how you're looking at that. And with gold prices where they are, this is definitely going to accelerate quite quickly. On the people front, just talk a little bit about some of the key people supporting you and assisting the company to reach this production milestone.
We've been very privileged as a group to be able to retain our key people for the better part of a decade, if not two. I have four senior managers who are responsible for each of the main areas of discipline. A gentleman by the name of John Lyons is our Chief Development Officer. He's now been in Mongolia for 25 years, fluent MBA background, is now responsible for any of the new projects that come into the pipeline, that next process of moving through pre-feas, feasibility. He'll be responsible for that. But he's just sort of coming out of being a key component in the build from the company oversight perspective. So John's a key member of that team. Here in Canada, I have a CFO vice president by the name of Robert Jenkins. Robert came out of the Brookfield Asset Management Group and joined us about 7 years ago, and is a key member of the corporate team here in Canada, and to a great extent helping us with the development of the company in Mongolia as well. We have a vice president of exploration, Michael Gillis, who's been with me in Mongolia for 20 years. Tremendous experience throughout the country. As I mentioned, we've had 100 exploration licenses, and he's been a key member of managing that team. I would expand on his role to the extent that we have our internal team of geologists, but we do draw upon some of the world's leading experts in the areas where we need that assistance. So in developing our understanding of the Bayan Khundii system, we brought on board Dr. Jeffrey Heidenquist, who is probably the world's foremost expert in epithermal deposits, and a number of other people of similar experience in various disciplines, whether it's structure on the porphyry side. So we have sought out and had those people come to site and assist us with those understandings. In addition to that, we have Bayarma Bagabunde, who's our Chief Administrative Officer, has been with us for almost 20 years as well, and Bilgo Nankbayar, who is our current CEO of the subsidiary, but an individual who went to school in Canada, worked on Bay Street in a boutique resource bank, came back to Mongolia. So a well-rounded team in various disciplines that helps me with the management of the company. And at the board level, we have 5 board members that include Leighton Croft, who's our chairman. Again, an individual who spent about 20 years working in Mongolia, now runs another junior mining company. I have Cameron McRae, who was instrumental in the build for Rio Tinto's, overseeing the first $6 billion spend in building out that first open pit. Ken McDonald is another board member here based in Halifax, who has tremendous experience in the financing side of the resource business. And finally, on the board level, I have Dr. Anna Bielik, who was Canada's first ambassador to Mongolia and brings tremendous depth of relationship in that region from a diplomatic and government relations perspective.
Thank you for going through that. It covers a lot of different areas of expertise that are absolutely needed to get to where you guys have been able to go. And then, of course, further down the road here. So appreciate you walking through some of those folks that are helping you out. Any other comments on just ramp up work in general here, commissioning work as you guys get moving here? How's things going there on site? Any challenges that have been faced on a technical basis? Anything further there just on ramp up, and then we'll jump into some of the other work.
Yeah, so this is a conventional plant in the sense that there's nothing really exotic here. It's a crush, grind, carbon and pulp plant with a gold elution circuit, gold doré produced and sold to the state. We went through that first gold sale just last week, and so everything went according to plan. I'd caution, I guess, that with any gold startup, it doesn't just happen overnight. We've commissioned it produce first gold, but there'll be a lot of tweaks and work to do to get that up to steady state. And there's a lot of, I guess, known unknowns when you're moving through a startup that we'll deal with as we get to that point. So, sort of give us a few months to get that plant up and humming at that 7,000 ounce per month nameplate. This is, as I mentioned, a very high quality ore in terms of metallurgy. It's going to provide us with recoveries of about 93 to 95%. We grind that to 80% passing 60 micron, and it leaches very well. It's unusual in that there's almost a complete absence of any sulfide material in this ore. It's a gold only with a bit of silver deposit, so pretty straightforward. Looking at the next steps as we come out of getting to steady state, there are opportunities to increase our volumes at that plant with some relatively minor adjustments. So we elected early not to put the gravity circuit on the front end, but as we continue to identify more high-grade ores in the vicinity of the Bayan Khundii pit, that's kind of a low-hanging fruit opportunity to push the high grade through gravity, send your tails into the plant. But because you have lower gold content going into the plant, you can reduce your retention time and therefore push more volume through. So there's things like that we're looking at that over the next year or so we will scope out and consider for potential upgrades moving forward. The other area that's materialized partially as a result of higher gold prices, it pushes your cutoff grade down. So we're now sitting with a significant and material increase in gold in what would otherwise have been subgrade stockpiles. Some of our ore is oxide, particularly as we move up to the second deposit to the north. And we see significant opportunity to expand on that oxide material and consider any heap leach opportunity in the future for some of that subgrade material. Again, a conceptual sort of scoping level study will be completed in the near term, but that's a very, nothing's easy in our business, but an easier path to bring on significantly more volume and production fairly quickly. So we're looking at that, those two opportunities to increase volume as we move forward. And, I can get into a little bit more detail perhaps in a moment, just where that upside comes from. But yeah, the plant is operating very well. We're very pleased to see us get to that completion of commissioning and first gold in mid-September as targeted.
Appreciate you going through that, and we'll hear a little bit more about the tweaks as you guys move forward here in the coming months. And again, to have it up and running where it is, you guys have been able to do a nice job on that front as well. So congratulations on that. It's not so often that everything goes so smoothly. So appreciate the comments on that. I do want to talk some of the other expansion potential. You guys have existing discoveries at Dark Horse Gold, Altan Nar Gold, and then you have Zun Mod, which is molybdenum copper, which
Yeah.
is quite interesting and quite sizable as well. Talk just a little bit about where you guys would put the priority first and foremost, and then what that expansion would look like, at least on the gold basis, because this is all fairly not too far away. Maybe you can orientate us a little bit there on that, Peter, but just talk about the focus and then go from there.
Yeah, so just to simplify things, the focus is on the Bayan Khundii complex, if you will. And the Bayan Khundii complex includes Dark Horse, Ulan, and the Bayan Khundii deposit. 16 kilometers north of that is the Altan Nar gold polymetallic system, and 35 kilometers to the east of Bayan Khundii is the Zun Mod porphyry molybdenum copper complex. So that's really the simplest way to look at it, is those three opportunities. The first is full of near-term low-hanging fruit to expand the Bayan Khundii mine. We have 476,000 ounces at 3.8 grams in the Bayan Khundii economic pit that we had in the feasibility, and about 3 kilometers north of that, a satellite pit where we have 50,000 ounces of 7-gram material, which gave us that 513 of 4 grams that make up that economic reserve that will be mined over the first 6 to 7 years. But all of that was defined at $1,800 gold. So today at $3,600 gold, we're seeing a world of opportunities around the Bayan Khundii pit to the north at Dark Horse that will allow us to expand, extend mine life, and potentially add expansions at Bayan Khundii, at the Bayan Khundii plant. So just a couple of examples of why we're so confident and excited about what's in front of us. First off, in the pit, we've been doing infill drilling, and that infill is suggesting that the footprint of the ore zone is actually larger than what we had in the feasibility study, perhaps as much as 20% in terms of volume and grade. We've had some just very high results near surface. We've been drilling off the top three benches as we move through this initial development, and we've hit up to 2.3 kilograms, so 2,300 grams per ton of gold in near surface mineralized quartz adularia veins. And that's obviously extremely high for a business, but we have seen those types of intersections elsewhere in the deposit previously. It's not unusual for us to be seeing multi-ounce intersections in this deposit, which is what makes it so incredibly unusual to have these types of grades at surface. So right away, we're seeing the potential for an increase based on our infill drilling. But immediately west of the pit, late last year, we drilled some exploratory holes, and we had the highest grades outside of the pit reserve that we'd seen to date. Examples would be up to 40 meters of 7 grams, just about 150 meters west of the pit. So we're now scheduling drilling to allow us to push that pit further to the west. We also have seen expansion opportunities to the south, and drilling will commence within the next 45 days to begin to define those expansion opportunities south and west of the pit. About half a kilometer west of the Bayan Khundii pit is a discovery we made, the last discovery we made actually in mid 2021, not yet in the resource category, still exploration to be done. But we intersected 350 meters of over a gram of gold, starting at 80 meters from surface in that target. We've had higher grade intervals of up to 40 meters of 8 grams. It's an epithermal feeder zone that's coming up along a vertical structure. We'll begin to do more exploration as we move west into that area as well. So some real near-term opportunities for expansion to the west. And as I mentioned earlier, we have this satellite pit 2.5 kilometers north, which is effectively along the same structure, which still needs more exploration. But at Dark Horse, we had 50 meters of 7-gram material. When we discovered that in early 21, we recognized an opportunity to quickly establish a small reserve to get into the mine plan, which we did. But what we didn't do was continue that exploration along that trend. So we've now identified about a 1.5 kilometer trend of what is largely oxide in the top 60 or 70 meters that we will begin drilling in Q4 of this year. And we've actually traced that along a secondary structure that also has significant gold and silver mineralization, which would bring us to well over 2 kilometers of strike length for exploration in what we call the Dark Horse Alton Arrow area. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of the opportunities in the near surface in the Bayan Khundii complex, where we have in excess of 10 kilometers of mineralized structure. And we really, with the exception of that Ulan deep hole I mentioned, have not done much exploration below 150 meters in an area that's never previously seen exploration before. We're the first out there to drill holes. So lots to come, lots of near-term, low-cost exploration we can do to extend mine life. So that's sort of step one at Bayan Khundii. Step two is the Alton Nard deposit, 16 kilometers north. Again, high grade, near surface, a bit of a different animal in that this is a gold polymetallic, an intermediate sulfidation system, but an average grade of about 2 grams per ton gold, 10 grams silver, and a combined lead zinc content of about 1%. We have 500,000 ounces of gold currently in resource there. But what happened with Alton Nard was we discovered that in 2012, pushed it forward till 2015, announced a resource at a period where you couldn't really raise money without massive dilution. So not a lot of money was spent there, but we were able to establish that resource. And in 2015, when we announced it, was the year that we picked up 4,000 gram samples at Bayan Khundii and switched our attention there. And that's where our attention's been ever since. So now with cash flow, we can get back up to Alton Nard, look to extend this 500,000 ounce deposit over what we see as a 5 kilometer strike length of opportunity. and begin to move that into the development queue as well. So late 26 into 27, advance that through the various technical studies and begin to move that into a construction stage as we move out 3 to 4 years from now. The bigger vision is that, with extension of mine life and potentially expansion at Bayan Khundii, and then bringing on Altan Nar, we can push this overall development into that 200 to 250,000 ounce per year range as we look out 3 to 4 years from now. So that's the gold side, with plenty of, call it grassroots exploration to do there as well. And then Zuun Mod is a 100% owned entity outside of the alliance with MMC. It's one of the largest undeveloped molybdenum projects in the Asia region. Mali, as you may be aware, has gone through a significant stabilization and increase in price. It's sitting close to $25 a pound today and has been north of 20 for several years, largely driven by a deficit in China. China is importing significant amounts of molybdenum today, and that's underpinned price. So we see this as an opportunity to now move forward on a resource that in situ today is about $8 billion worth of metal content, mainly moly with copper byproduct. We've just completed the work necessary to update the resource there, which we'll announce ideally before the end of Q3. And we're beginning to do the work on the economic studies to support pushing that project forward. So another exciting opportunity that sits in the inventory here that most investors don't know a whole lot about, but has significant opportunity to add value for our shareholders.
Peter, thank you for walking through all of that. First of all, the pipeline is quite exceptional. And I think the move to seek production like you guys have, it has been the right move, even though 5 years ago, maybe people questioned that, but definitely that's been the right move here because the opportunities immediately at mine site and then the potential for satellites on the gold side is very interesting. Everything's quite close. I mean, certainly you could bring in satellite deposits here and expand. That's great. And then this kicker with molybdenum copper there at Zuun Mod is quite interesting as well. I guess to demonstrate the operatorship in Mongolia, I think that's where, too, through these different steps you guys are proceeding through, that will continue to attract investors and, of course, will result in better valuation for the company as well going down the road. So you guys got a lot of things on the plate, I suppose. Anything else just on the exploration potential for this district that you guys have?
Yeah, so I mentioned all of what we're up to in what we call the Khundii district in terms of what we own today, but I'd step back a little bit in sort of back to 2009, 2010, when we first discovered Altan Nar, which had us start to focus on the Khundii district. We spent the better part of $6 million on pure regional exploration in a 400-kilometer trend and identified a series of high priority acquisitions that we were interested in. And going back to my earlier conversation on government land being opened up, those areas are sitting in areas that are prospectively going to be open for tender in the future. So we are sitting patiently, as we have been for the better part of 28 years. We've shown our patience to act when the time is right to make some other acquisitions along that trend. One other thing I would mention is that the earlier part of this year, we announced the acquisition of an option in the Oyu Tolgoi belt on a project called Tereg Uul. We can earn up to 80% in Tereg Uul. And the reason we acted on that, our plate's quite full in the Bayan Khundii district, but we obviously have been watching the Oyu Tolgoi situation. This is one of the world's great copper gold belts. It trends over about 50 kilometers of prospects and deposits. And since 2009, that area had been largely restricted from the issuance of new projects. And a license was issued in 2003 as a tender awarded to a Mongolian group, whom we subsequently entered into this option agreement with. This is just 5 kilometers south of the Oyu Tolgoi land package, right on that same trend of deposits. And we are now carrying out geophysics and mapping and geochemistry on that license with an expectation we will be drilling targets there by early next year. So a new opportunity has been added to the mix here fairly recently in the Erdene holdings.
Wishing you luck further on that as well, and then also some of these upcoming availability to get additional concessions there in Mongolia. That's fantastic. And just back to some of the intercepts that you guys have been able to come up with, fantastic on that, based on the recoveries that you guys are getting with the existing production. These are good numbers as well. Back over to community work real quick, and then we'll talk about longer term strategy in a minute. But you mentioned a little bit of the work on community before and that alignment work. Anything specifically? I think we've got a good understanding on government side of things, but just on the local community work, maybe some of the additional things you guys have been working on over the years as well. Now that you're in cash flow, that looks a little bit different as well. You guys have a lot of employment there locally. Any other thoughts on community work that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so we have been in what's called Bayan Khundii province since 2005 when we acquired the Zunmad project. So it's been 20 years being in this local community, and I feel strongly about the benefits that we will share and need to share with that local community. It's very low density population. We're in fact in the lowest density population area in Mongolia, which makes it one of the lowest in the world. So not a whole lot of interaction with local people in the vicinity of our project. But there is a town about 110 kilometers north, which is the town of Shinjinst, and we are really dedicating much of our work to that area, as well as the province center. We've brought in a new water supply system into the Shinjinst Zone. We've added new sanitary facilities for the elementary school and kindergarten, upgrading roads in the vicinity of the town and to our site. So really focused there, mostly on the health and education side. I'd also mention that we've really prioritized local employment. It is hard to find local people with experience, but what we did was we took 160 people, I believe it was, and had them go to the UHG coal mine, which is owned by MMC in the eastern part of the country. And for the last year, we trained them and employed them there so that they could come back home and be our heavy equipment operators on site. And so that's what we've done. We have well over 100 people now from the local communities employed in well-paying long-term jobs that has a tremendous impact on that small community to the north. We've generated now 1,000 direct and indirect jobs in an area that really has no previous large-scale industrial development. We have 300 plus full-time jobs at site, and as you can imagine, significant spin-offs to that. We have worked closely with small business enterprises. There's not a lot in Shinjinsk, but also in Bayan Khundii. As an example, helping provide initial funding, interest-free loans to a local sewing group who can assist us in our uniforms and sample bags, that type of thing. We've been bringing in doctors and healthcare professionals for local screening, preventative screening. So some things that are really starting to make a difference in that local community, and we're quite proud of the contribution we've made, and we'll continue to make on a increasingly active schedule as we move forward.
Peter, thank you for going through that. I think that's a very important area to focus on, all the things you guys are doing there, and then also what it means to the community to have this economic opportunity. It's got to be huge for that region. There's just not a lot happening in that area, and mineral resource development is a key thing. Lots of wealth creation here going down the road. Really appreciate what you guys are doing for that community, as well as the skills, the training. That's all very good stuff there. And then also folks are realizing through this work the importance of natural resource development, the importance of mining and how critical this is to everyday life. Appreciate you guys going through that, and of course working with the local community. Peter, just looking towards kind of the longer term strategy for the company. You guys right now are proving up operatorship. What do you see as the end goal here? You guys are developing out this, you guys have a pipeline already. You're working towards that. Lots of stuff happening here. Would you guys continue to be a Mongolia focused mining company in the future growing? Is M&A on the table for maybe a mid-tier or major looking to expand in the country or enter the country? What are your thoughts on that long-term strategy?
I feel like we've been provided with an opportunity here in the Khundii Minerals District to develop a multi-mine, high-grade mining district. And we will see that initially with expansions and extensions of mine life at Bayan Khundii, but there's no reason to think we won't see second developments coming on stream here fairly rapidly at places like Altan Nar in an area that's still never seen modern exploration. We've spent, let's say we've spent 50 million on exploration over the last decade, but almost all of that has gone into drilling off deposits. So I'm as excited, if not more excited, about what's to come here. And it's hard to envision, going forward with an M&A type transaction before we start to realize more of that value for our shareholders. I'd never rule it out. When the opportunity is presented, we'll take it to the board and consider it. But for now, it's heads down. Let's get really going on aggressive exploration in an area that has not seen it, and act on the strategy that we put in place back in 2019 to say, let's get the cash flow. Then we can start to spend money on the exploration that's required here in this district.
I like the thinking. I think that's the right way to go about it here, and a lot more to prove up, and of course, a lot more value to be had here. So I think we are at the start of that. Well, Peter, why don't we wrap it up here at this point? Good discussion here, good introduction. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization of about 500 million Canadian dollars. Why should Erdene Resource Development be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors' portfolio at this point?
When you look at the potential cash flow spinning off of this, we're trading at perhaps a 3.5 to 4 to 1 multiple on that cash flow. If you're a believer like I am in gold prices continuing to move up, then that's a pretty attractive multiple for entrance at this point. But it doesn't incorporate any of that upside I just discussed. And I've been working in this business for 38 years. I haven't seen the prospectivity that we have sitting on our doorstep around the Bayan Khundii mine. So, very good combination in this high gold price environment to be able to get an anchor into a company that is producing at that multiple level, but with this exploration upside is unique.
And in that case, I also think you're getting the base metals for free so far. So we'll see how that goes. So thank you for that, Peter. And for interested parties seeking further information, how can they reach the company?
You can connect with us at info@erdene.com. Our website is erdene.com. Be happy to follow up and have discussions if you're interested.
Peter, well, thank you for the introduction to Erdene Resource Development. Best of luck with the ramp up of operations and cash flow on the way. We're looking forward to having you come back and update in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.